So, horror films, horror games, everything scary is what we're here to talk about. Did I all frighten you with the cheap thrill scare?
No, because your mic's too crappy for it.
That's true. One scare for you. So, as you guys are aware, the Annabelle 2 movie comes out. It comes out. If you come, then you'll float too. If you come, you'll float. That freaks me out every time I saw it. In the trailer, I was telling Dan earlier, a while back, that screw him, the trailer freaked me out. On the TV.
It was awesome.
It was like, if you come, then you'll float. I'm like, oh, yeah. I'm not good with horror.
I think the important thing with that trailer is the comparison between the original trailer and the new trailer when they put them side by side. I don't know who made that video, but it went very viral. And you can see how closely they've kept the storyline to the original while still doing their own little bits over the top of it. And I think that that's the important thing, is that we are getting that same experience just with a few modern takes on it.
With a higher definition as well, and the ability to do computer graphics and freak the fuck out. And I don't know if Dan ever told any of you how I act when I watch a scary movie. I get very antsy and I get very kind of aggressive to the film. So it's... What is it funny to watch?
What does that mean?
I kind of yell at the thing.
But yeah, the thing about when I see the movies with Mike, particularly horror movies, normally he is a little bit chatty or that through a movie, a normal movie or that. But when it comes to horror movies, you will never see Mike more animated, which is hard to believe. But Mike is extremely animated through horror movies. Annabelle, the very first Annabelle, when it came out, one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. But I got through it by watching Mike be scared at the movie. That was my way of getting through all the scary parts and that. I could just turn to my left and there was Mike just curled up in the fetal position, squealing like a little child, just absolutely losing his shit at this movie. And that is how, if you ever need to get through a horror one.
Yep. If it was like walking through, you see a scene and a woman's walking towards this little chair. Remember that, Dan? Down in the basement, and you're like,
yeah,
don't go in that room.
The demon behind it.
You're like, don't do that. What are you doing that for? Why would you do that? Dude, punch him in the face.
Do you hide behind the couch and shoot at the film?
Pretty much, sometimes. I wish I would have.
That's what I used to do as a kid.
Yep. I remember a while ago, it was just crazy. A movie called Dog Soldiers, Werewolves. I was very young at the time, and I watched a film, and it freaked the fuck out of me. And I started walking around the house with a knife.
At the time.
This was
like 38.
Yeah, rubbish. I'm like 30, number one. And it was like when I was 12, 13.
That can't be right. I remember watching Dog Soldiers, like, recently.
It's an old film.
Like, it was... No, but...
Maybe it's a new one.
No, I like Dog Soldiers a lot. It's actually
This was the werewolves?
Yeah,
it was made in the 90s.
Came out in 2002.
What?
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's what I'm saying. Like, you can't be... Because I remember watching it, I was already old enough not to find it scary, but more cool, because... Fuck, man, like, there's so few good werewolf films.
That's right. It was a good werewolf film. I think because I had a nightmare about it. It was, like, freaking me out.
What are you talking about? Breaking Dawn was amazing.
Yeah, that was a good film. But that wasn't a werewolf thing. Oh, wait, Breaking Dawn. Hang on. I thought you meant the other one.
It, I think.
Isn't that Twilight?
That's
Are you talking Twilight now?
Oh, there we go.
That's the vampire one, isn't that, with Quentin Tarantino?
It was on at work.
It was on at work today, yeah.
They'll probably throw those on at like fucking doctor places where you have those movies. You'll be like, and there'll be like Twilight playing in the background. Like, fuck that.
I went over to talk to Dan today at work, and like I walked over to his team area, and it was on the big TV. Twilight was on, and he's got his back to the TV where he sits, and I'm like, don't turn around. It's better this way.
Better love story than Twilight.
It's actually for poor Kessie. Kessie's the one who cops it. Jay and Haley keeps putting it on. Like, and he always asks for the soccer, and instead of putting the soccer on, they always put Twilight on for him. Drives him crazy.
That's the sort of thing that will lead to the story of a horror movie, is teasing someone with like Twilight movies over and over again. Before you know it, it's actually they're making movies about what happens to the guy when he finally snaps.
Anyway, going back from another scary movie from Twilight to other scary games. Games is what we're looking at today. I know Dan's favourite scary film is either the Isolation or Dead Space. Which one is it, Dan?
Scary movie, meaning.
Well, scary game.
Game.
Scary game.
I like how you got dragged down with that, Arthur.
Yeah, I
did.
Gotcha.
Look, Dead Space had a bit of horror at the start of it, but once you get into the meat of it, it stops being so much horror, and it has like a mix of horror and action and survival and all that kind of stuff.
Tell us the story about
Isolation, though. Dead Space. So essentially, I mean, we're 4 major games in with some other minor games, including an iOS game, that kind of thing. You've got 2 movies and I think 3 books off the top of my head, or at least 3 that I've seen. For it follows the story of Isaac Clarke, who in the very first game is landing on the Ishimura. They are responding to a distress signal. Pretty much the ship is gone. It had its own unique gameplay kind of thing for it, which wasn't mind-blowing, but it was a fun difference to the usual FPS kind of style thing. The storyline was solid. It wasn't brilliant. It had a couple of good scares, particularly at the start when you first land and everything goes to chaos and you have to just run with no guns, no anything, and you're just absolutely running from it, to finding the necromorphs with like just banging their heads on walls, like you can hear it as you're getting closer and you don't know what's happening until you're right there, to the whole Nicole storyline, which is kind of what the whole first game is about, is that you're actually on that ship to try and find your what I believe is your girlfriend at the time. I believe it's girlfriend, could be wife, fiance, I'm not too sure. And that, so you spend the whole game trying to find her, hoping that she's alive. You've got this message from her saying, come get me, and that's your goal with it whilst all the chaos happens and that. So the storyline was good, and obviously the reception to it was good enough that they brought on a second game. And the third game, they changed things up. So whilst the second game kept the same formula, progressed to the storyline, but added a bit more in, added a few new characters, a new location and that kind of stuff. The third game changed the formula. They added microtransactions. They added co-op, which was online only, which is a really weird choice for it. If you're going to add the co-op, you would have assumed that it was local co-op as well. But they didn't do that. They also changed the location from space to an ice planet, which a lot of people seem to hate. Personally, I enjoyed something different. You don't want to be doing the same game over and over. There's only so many times in space that the same bad stuff can happen before you stop, letting it happen. As a result, we haven't seen anything from Dead Space since the third game. What they did do to really reinforce all the storylines in that, they had the Wii game. So instead of having your normal controller where you walk around and that, this is a point and shoot, kind of like an arcade style game. And it was interesting because it had the co-op option, as well as there's a little puzzle mechanic that they built into it. And so whilst, all the enemies were coming at you, you're actually using your tool like as an engineer, which is what your role was. You weren't actually a soldier or anything like that. As an engineer. But yeah, you get to use your tools to unlock the doors, as opposed to just hitting a button or that. There are actual puzzles involved, as though you were kind of rewiring the door and that kind of stuff, whilst the necromorphs were coming at you, which once again was just a nice little addition to, instead of just pointing and shooting at things, they added some puzzles, added some ideas, and between the 4 games you started to get this strong picture of what was happening, what was causing it. This whole there was unitologists, I believe is what they call the church that is worshipping. It's like a crazy cult where they pretty much preempt all the bad stuff that happens. They worship that ideology and that kind of stuff. So it had some things to talk about with religion on it as well. But on top of that, the movies, there was 2 movies that came, and whilst the Wii game was set on the planet below where the Ishimura was, the first movie is actually the Ishimura before you land on it as Isaac Clarke, and it literally, where it finishes is where the game starts, which once again just reinforces the whole storyline of what's happening, you know, and what's caused it all. And then the second one, after you leave the Ishimura and all that kind of stuff, you're on a whole different planet than that. You don't really know what happened in between, and that movie gives you this big storyline as to what was happening on the planet a bit more, and you know how you ended up on this other planet. So they really did a whole lot of storyline between everything, all the different mediums that they could do. And then on top of that, like I said, they do have the books as well.
Mind you, the criticism of the first game in particular is that it's not really a horror game.
Like I said, it's scary at the start because you don't know what's happening. A lot of games and movies as well, as well, there's that as well. But anything, once you know what the bad thing is, then it becomes a lot less scary. One of the reasons why I felt Lost as a TV show worked early on was because you never knew what was happening on that island. But as soon as they tried to explain what was happening on the island, you're suddenly less scared by it, you're less interested in it. It becomes more of a debate of how realistic it is rather than the fear of the unknown. And I think Dead Space is an example of that. At first you don't know what's happening, but as soon as you really know and you've seen all the different iterations of what can come at you, it's not so scary. And so that's why the second game is a lot less scary. They added 1 or 2 new enemy types in that, but it's not really enough to, you know, give you a whole sense of this unknown again. Not the best horror kind of game, but it was a really, really good game. I'm still really disappointed that it ended at 3 where it did. 3 seemed to be trying to do more and not succeeding, but it opened up so much more possibilities for what that game could have done. And the people looking for a little bit of an extra little secret with the game, if you have a look at the chapter names, the first letter of each chapter does spell out a little bit of a secret for both the first and the third game.
Okay, and so what about Alien Isolation? Now that's based off the series, and I believe Dan, you've played the game. So tell us a bit about that game. What makes it special? What makes it horror themed? Is it a good game? Is it a bad game? What do you know?
I think it's a pretty good game. I played through the whole way, did quite enjoy it. It's very unique compared to a lot of other games, particularly within the horror genre of games. One of the important things is, I guess, the survival theme that it sticks to. A lot of games, I guess, if we look at, say, Resident Evil or that, you look at how it started as a horror kind of thing and then kind of moves more towards the action. This game is purely focused on the survival aspects of games, and it really relates back to the very first Alien movie, which is what it's emulating. And that's a movie that was 35 years earlier. What's very special about the game, though, is that it also mimics the technology and visual appearance of the movie itself. So back in 79, obviously the technology wasn't anywhere near what we have these days. So when you go back and watch those movies, they do kind of look dated. The game itself managed to give you the latest in, gaming graphics while still mimicking that 1979 feel that they created in the movie. So you don't feel like, even though it's set at the same time, you don't feel like they're miles apart. You feel like it's picked up right at the same time.
You really think, just as a side note, do you really think that the effects of the first Alien film are dated?
Yeah, definitely. If you look at like computer interfaces in particular,
you
go back to
angle. Yeah, sure, but
yeah, it's not like it looks bad, but we talk about Mother and how Mother came across with just little lines of text, whereas these days you would have a voice actor relaying those kind of things.
Yeah, well, I think that one of the things that any classic sci-fi always gets wrong is GUIs. They never have GUIs in their computers. The closest thing I'd say is Star Trek Next Gen, which had a kind of almost what looks like a modern day smartphone app kind of Windows Surface type thing, but most of the time they never seem to comprehend that such a thing as a graphical user interface would ever be invented. It'd all be like text-based.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the things
But-
with it is that it's all, pre-generated and that it's not actually functional
Yeah.
in all those kind of things.
But I wouldn't say the effects are dated. They're actually, I think, actually hold up relatively well, like particularly the practical stuff.
Yeah. I guess I should clarify that it's more the technology aspect of what's available in those movies compared to what we would create today. If you remade the 1979 movie today, technology-wise for the ship and the interfaces and all that kind of stuff, it would be very, very different to
Yes.
what was created back then. And I really enjoyed the fact that, a game that was a AAA budget game that's all about the visuals and graphics and all that, and it really does have quite good graphics in it, but it still mimics the original 1979 movie, so you feel like you're in the same universe, despite 35 years of technology's difference.
I think the thing the game does well is how it plays with light and shadow and sound.
It's very immersive. Like, when you sit there playing that game, you really are scared of what that alien is going to do to you. It's hiding in the cupboards, hiding under things and that. And whilst the game isn't perfect about it, it creates the perfect experience of, you can really immerse yourself in it. And I believe that there's features with, like the PlayStation camera and that kind of stuff, that if you move, it detects that you're moving. And so it's going to react based on that. So it's not just a controller kind of thing. You can really sit there and pretend that you're that character. And it was just refreshing that it was a survival game. Like, we all love, our action games and that kind of thing. And the second movie was such a good change to the first movie because it gave us something different. And I'm very big on the changes between movies. When a movie creates a sequel and it's exactly the same, normally I end up bored. But the second Alien movie went from what if you have one of these to what if you have lots of these. And it's fun to do that in the games, but quite often that's what we do in the games, and I find Alien Isolation stands out in terms of not doing the same as all the other games have done, especially with the Alien franchise.
So in terms of horror, it was good because you actually had to sit there and be still, and like say there was music or there was sound or there was.
Yeah, I mean, everything. It really combines. The soundtrack and the sound effects in the game are perfect and spot on for exactly what you're doing. The sense of fear with that little beeping as you look at your sensor to work out where the alien is absolutely spot on and recreating the feel of the movie, particularly the first two movies, I guess. You know that alien is always watching you, and all your objectives, that you have to, run past the alien or that's going to alert it, and then it's going to appear and try and hunt you down.
It's part of being powerless as well. That's kind of the whole idea of the genre. I mean, the Penumbra and Amnesia games kind of follow the same mode. They don't give you any weapons or any way to fight back. It's essentially, you can stack chairs, but there's no actual way to fight the thing that you're trying to run away from, pretty much. And it's supposed to evoke the feeling of horror through sound and the design of funneling you to actually feel fear by playing with your senses correctly. It's the hallmarks of a good horror game.
Definitely. I definitely think Alien achieves everything Isolation achieved everything it was aiming to achieve. Let's not confuse it with Colonial Marines and everything that happened with that.
No. I mean, it's a franchise that's had its fair share of shit, but that's not to say that it hasn't been a fair amount of good stuff too.
And a couple of the really good games were actually way back when on the Atari Jaguar and the Sega Dreamcast was one of the first-person shooter games to be released on those platforms was Alien vs. Predator, and it was renowned for having great atmosphere, especially that whole sound thing as well. They were sort of, running the old sort of Quake-style graphics. These consoles weren't very powerful, but was one of the first launch titles for the Jaguar, and was, absolutely praised for its atmosphere and graphical achievements back in the time that it was released, and that was in the 90s.
It was also because AVP, there was a legitimate difference in how the game, when you were a Predator, you felt like a Predator. You could destroy anything. You're essentially immortal in the game. When you were the alien, it had a very different feel as well. Not quite as powerful, but you basically could run around walls, and it had a whole kind of 3D thing, and you were clearly like, but you were still hunting something. And then the difference of being the Marine, when you would just see a little boop, 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 and that was quite a contrast. Like, playing those segments was annoyingly frightening, because you were like, I was such a badass playing the Predator, and now I'm this lonely human.
Yeah, and all you had really was your shotgun and the rangefinder.
Yeah.
And it did a great job of that feeling of dread.
Yes.
Because you were so squishy and pink and not like powerful, and all you had was a shotgun. But yeah, definitely probably still better games than Colonial Marines, as Dan mentioned.
Colonial Marines, such a disappointment. That was one of those games that everyone was so excited for, and, you know, just so far from the mark.
Universally hates it as well.
It is one of the lowest rating games probably ever to be created.
And look, Dan's probably going to be very happy. It and one other game were responsible for Steam bringing in the bullshot rule as well. So for those unaware, the bullshot rule is your game has to actually look like the launch trailers and the screenshots, at least to a degree. Where Colonial Marines, I think, was they basically rendered everything and said, this is what the game's going to look like, and then at the end, it didn't even close to what they promised, and it was, you know, all bullshit. And the other game, Dan, have you got any idea what that might be?
Oh, I'm gonna know it as soon as you say it.
No Man's
Go for
Sky.
it. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, Colonial Marines and No Man's Sky were responsible for Steam bringing in the bullshot clause into their early access games, where you actually had to
Try
and make the, you know, launch trailers and screenshots look like something like the game you're going to bring out. It was kind of like promising a fillet steak and then bringing out like a slightly warmed up turd, really, though, wasn't it?
The thing about them is just, it's so easy to, I guess, before a game comes out, to manipulate the footage and that you have of a game to create this bigger expectation of what you're actually going to, you know, achieve. But in doing so, they just set themselves up to fail. Like, No Man's Sky is the biggest example of that, in the terms of, if they hadn't promised so much, the expectation to deliver all of that wouldn't have been so high.
Yeah.
And the rating for their game would have actually been higher at the time of its release. And it would have had its own cult following as they released more and more updates. People would have been more and more excited about it. And it would have been something that they built on constantly. Instead, you know, they created this big hype machine, got extra funding for it, and still couldn't deliver anywhere near close to what they were trying to do.
I guess Colonial Marines falls into that other type of horror game where it's just horrible to play.
Yeah, that was the butchering of such a great series.
Yeah.
I always get upset when something to do with the Alien and Predator universe isn't good, because they're one of my favorite series, and I have such high expectations for anything made, you know, in regards to them, because you've had a history of so many good things created around them that at this point, you shouldn't be fucking them up. Like, there should be some quality control on that just really nails it perfectly, you know. And like with Prometheus, I understand, like, people are on the fence either side of it, or, you know, but at least there's lots of people liking it to go alongside the people that don't like it. Whereas like something like Colonial Marines, just nobody liked. There's not a single person out there going, yeah, that was okay.
No, not at all. Which is unfortunate, but I mean, it's funny. Like, a lot of movie or TV adaptations never get the games that they deserve. And I know there's been some good Alien games. Don't get me wrong, but it often feels like that the video game adaptation of a movie or a TV show is always an afterthought. It's just that cash grab at the end, where they're like, oh, maybe we can get another few $1 million out of this, and they've never really lived up to the hype. A lot of them anyway. And not just with the Alien series, like with any game.
Most of them are cash grabs. I mean, the vast majority of them. There's, I mean, this is pretty well known that you don't buy the game based on the movie. And there's been a few notable exceptions, but the exceptions are very much exceptions.
Few and far between.
Yeah, they're There's a reason they're called exceptions and not the norm.
Yeah. Well, I think Alien Isolation's the opposite. It didn't create this big hype or anything like that. I remember seeing little bits that just made me interested in the game, particularly the whole reference to the 1979 movies and the tech and the graphics and all that kind of stuff. But at no point were they going out there and creating this hype train of this is going to be the most amazing game that you've ever seen and all that. And it was enough to keep me like watching when the game came out. And as soon as like it did come out, I was like, oh, the reviews are actually really good for it, and I haven't heard that much else about it, and then like slowly, like a week or two after it came out, you just started hearing through all the different channels how good the game was, and the game itself sold itself. It wasn't hype, it wasn't anything other than the fact that they made a quality game.
I mean, it's not really a movie tie-in game, keep in mind. It's built up from the ground as a game, presumably with the point of being what it is. It's not
it's in between the first and second movie, so it follows Amanda Ripley, which is Ellen Ripley's daughter, which they refer to in the second movie about her and when she died and what happened, but they don't tell you how she specifically died or anything like that.
In the second
so
movie?
This is...
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, with Paul, what's his face? And he was like, your daughter died, but she lived to like 100.
It's actually a deleted scene. It wasn't in the original.
Okay.
It just says something like she was 66 or something, wasn't it?
I thought she was like lived to...
No, he pretty much says like she lived a normal life and...
Yeah, she lived to like 66 and she died like 5 years earlier or something like that.
Yeah, that's when Ripley comes out of sleep, isn't it?
Yeah.
She just gets that
yeah.
little-
She died
little
just
aside.
before it.
Yeah.
But there's no actual details about what happened in her life or anything like that.
The game, I
Whereas
don't think the creators of the movies intended for there to be some plot about her meeting aliens as well. That was just a cute little side that they created for the game, which is fine. That's not a problem. But
I think they just expanded on the universe and they went, these are great things, and here's this plot point that wasn't covered at all, and here's what we can do with it. And someone went, yeah, that's actually a really good idea, and that's where it's expanded from. So, like, I'm fully in support of that. Unlike where they wanted to remake the third and fourth movie and cut them out and make a new third movie based around Hicks with Sigourney Weaver, even though now she's 20 years older, they wanted to keep it as though it was right after the second movie.
I'd be fine with that.
No, firstly, I hate cutting it out. Like, you've already made the movies, stand by what's there. If you want to do an in-between, then do an in-between, but don't try and cut out movies that we've had for 20, 30 years now.
You don't like when they, like, redo a whole canon?
Nah, stick by what you made.
Even if what they've made is terrible? A la Amazing Spider-Man.
See, I just choose not to watch those because I know beforehand that they're going to be bad.
Yeah, but you don't expect them to count those as, like, canon, considering they've, again, did the origin story for, like, the 50th time.
But that's it. They keep rebooting series and redoing it, and then I hate that, personally. Don't reboot it. Just stick with it. You want to make something later, make something later. If you want to make in-betweens, make in-betweens, but don't reboot it. Don't rewrite that whole whatever. If you want to completely remake the movie as it was, then sure. Different actors, same storyline. I'm fine by that. But don't be like, oh, actually, we'll cut this movie out and now we'll throw this in and then this is all different and sweet. We've got that same movie. That's what I don't like.
I'd be... Like, I kind of have this idea that, like, when all the Marvel... I mean, assuming they just don't go on forever, this Marvel-verse, like, films... But
why wouldn't they? Like, they're making so much money. I can't see an end to that.
Supposedly, one day people may or may not get tired of it. That's the argument's been made.
Well, yeah, the superhero fad. Yeah, the superhero fad may die because that's originally, like they were saying, the start of Iron Man was that the superhero franchise had died off, and bringing in Iron Man had actually reinvigorated the superhero era. Due to, I think we had podcasts about this, where it was they got so much awesomeness because of the whole little terror, the whole terrorist thing, and people were like, well, we need to feel safe in our homes, and so we watch movies about patriotism, and kicking the bad guys' asses and stuff. So
That's definitely
Yeah,
not
but-
something we've ever talked about.
I'm pretty sure.
I would have noticed such a topic on this.
Maybe we
this
did a private
podcast.
conversation after.
There must be one you've had in your head.
I mean,
I'm sure Mike has lots in his head.
I mean, eventually though, the guys that play the Marvel characters are going to get too old to play them. They're going to have to reboot it with new actors.
But look at what they did in the comics. They switch it up with the different versions and that
Yeah,
with it.
the
I mean,
alternative timelines and whatnot.
Yep. Time travel and also cloning and also digital de-aging, which is apparently we're quite happy to do at this point.
X-Men,
so eventually
Days of
that'll
Future
get.
Past, yeah.
I mean, if you look at Batman, he's been around for how long? You know, between series and movies and all that kind of stuff. Now that we look at the DC universe and the Marvel universe as opposed to just, Batman or just Superman, between all the different characters that's in there, they have an infinite pool of movies and shows and series. There's no way that you can't keep creating something completely different, for 50 years, 100 years or that. I don't see an end to it. I think the movies may change the way that they approach it. They might have to reinvigorate it, but I don't think that there's going to be an end to those universes at any point.
I mean, with Batman, this is something you probably don't know, but I'm sure Aaron can attest to this, that Batman is Jesus, and have you accepted Batman as your Lord and Savior? I mean, that's really the question you have to ask yourself.
Absolutely.
But I mean, which Batman do we accept as our
It's gotta
Lord and
be
Savior?
Adam West Batman. There is no other Batman.
But I mean, you got to think about Batman being the original, detective character to now he's, a superhero with superpowers and super muscles.
Yeah. He wasn't much of a detective to begin with. It was quite funny. Some of the earlier Batman comics, Batman just axed dudes left, right, and center. Like, he didn't give a fuck. Like, this whole non-killing thing wasn't until later on. Like, early on, Batman would ice you as quick as look at you. But
that's to do with the laws around comics, wasn't it? Didn't they create a law that you couldn't have violence and that people couldn't die? And
that was the comics code. Yeah, it came out to make sure that parents, when they bought a comic for little Johnny, he wasn't going to get gratuitous sex scenes or gore or anything, because they got a little bit out of hand there for a while. So yeah, that was a thing. But I think
Batman, the original horror villain.
I think we've digressed a little bit, though.
Oh, just as a quick side note, I marathoned the first season of Preacher. That's based on the comic book.
Okay.
Is that the one that was
yesterday.
done by the Walking Dead guy?
I don't know, but it's weirdly enough, it's got Seth Rogen as one of the producers of in the credits. But it's really good.
Is it the one with the demon inside him? The kid with the not the kid, but the
the main character is possessed by like a demon, or it's like a child of essentially a demon and an angel, or like a heavenly creature and like a. So I
started watching that.
He's essentially possessed by Nephilim because that's what Nephilim are. So that's the plot, but it's really good, and it's from memory. Like, I've never read the comic. I know a lot of pieces of the comic from reading about it, and it was always on my list of like Vertigo stuff to buy. But it's considered like the second and third best of all the Vertigo stuff. So, but the show is really good, and I would highly recommend you all to marathon it up if you can.
I did start watching it. It was good. If it's the one I'm thinking of, I was enjoying it, but I lost track with all the other shows at the time. So I'll have to go back and watch a little bit.
It's got a good amount of gore in it.
Cool.
If we digress back to a horror thing, you could move on to, say, another game. What was it called? Five Nights at Freddy's.
Oh, Five Nights at Freddy's.
So I've played a little bit of it. Dan's played a bit of it. Has anyone else had a go at playing Five Nights?
My son plays it. I've watched it being played, and I've watched some videos online, some that were quite amusing. Basically, it's a more of a survival horror game, would you say? Or it's a bit funny. Like, there's possessed robots in this restaurant. I know I'm not really selling it, but...
A kids thing, wasn't it? Dan should know. It was a kids restaurant.
Yeah, so the restaurant is called Freddy's Fazbear's Pizza. So it's meant to be like Chuck E. Cheese and that kind of thing. That's where the name kind of comes from. And obviously Five Nights at Freddy's is a reference to that pizza shop. So pretty much you're a security guard sitting there in your little security office, and you get several tools that you can utilize, namely the security cameras, to survive against animatronic characters. So you got the bear thing, the little girl doll. I'm trying to think of what was in it. It always reminds me of the I always watch the Rooster Teeth immersion. I don't know if you guys have seen that, where they actually recreated it in real life.
Yes.
So they had the two guys sitting in there, Mike and Gavin, and they
like
fully created.
Little sly way of saying, I don't know if you've seen that, and I haven't totally made you watch that just now.
It was subtle at the time. The only reason I made you, Arthur, is because you've never watched anything, and whenever we share anything, it's just like, has anyone watched this? Everyone's like, yes, yes. Arthur's always, no.
I have peculiar tastes, okay? That's all.
Well,
I
Arthur,
have
you watched the
hipster
video.
tastes. What do you want from
You
me?
watched the video very recently, in fact.
Like right
What did
then.
you... Literally right before. What did you think of it? Tell us about it.
It was cute.
Cute. The horror movie was cute.
It's not really a horror movie. It's obviously meant for comedic reasons. Mind you, I did mention off the podcast, but I'll mention on the podcast that the background of this thing is that the guy that made it made like a kids game, and the characters were criticized for being incredibly horrifying and terrifying looking because they had those creepy freaking white eyes, and so he decided to take that on board and create a horror game based around them as a result. So that's kind of hilarious.
There's also books now.
I think there's a whole
two
thing
novels?
about it now. It's essentially its own franchise now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's got a cult following and that, because they're only indie games, like they're
Yeah.
not AAA budget.
Well, I think
or
it's
anything
made by
like
one
that.
guy. At least the original was.
Yeah, there's 5 games now, believe it or not,
5 Nights.
and 5 games.
But yeah, no, it was cute. It's fine. I wouldn't mind. It's kind of reminds me of like escape rooms. It's got that kind of vibe to it. So it's got the same, I guess. Actually, it reminds me of when I was in Queensland. Do you ever guys go to that weird like laser place that's all really dark and they hang like gross shit from the ceiling and make you creeped out? At least try to. That's what that
No.
reminded me of.
I haven't.
You mean like a laser versus zombie thing, and you go fight them, or?
No, it's not like laser tag zombie. That's a separate thing. It's more like it's essentially a chamber. Like it's a maze that you go through, full of things to creep you out, and it's really dark. So it's kind of sensory deprivation. So that's the idea, and it sort of has that vibe to it as well, like an escape room or like a real horror thing to make you creeped out. They like make weird sounds from the corners or like blow wind in a certain direction, that sort of stuff.
What? Speaking of games and yes,
Not to derail the entire conversation for you.
well, still derailing it. Speaking of games and the horror kind of elements, have you guys seen? I think it was called Project Zero that they ran a couple of times here in Australia.
No?
It was a it's kind of like was it laser tag? I can't remember what they used for the guns.
Yeah, I think it was a laser
But
tag.
essentially, what they got warehouses, like abandoned warehouses, and they did them up to look like proper sets and that. And essentially, they created a very realistic zombie apocalypse. And you and 5 of your mates would run into this warehouse, and essentially you experience what it would be like after the apocalypse. So they had actors, fake zombies, like automated ones and that, and you were just running through this warehouse kind of surviving and that kind of stuff. And they said that it was very realistic, very immersive with it, to the point that like people would see doors and would think that they were like some super commando kind of guy and would just charge through the door, not remembering that it was all just made of plaster and that kind of stuff. Or they'd jump off a balcony just, in the heat of the moment, and then because everyone's watching it on the camera to make sure that they're okay, and they'll just be in their ear, just be like, hey, you okay? That was a pretty big jump. And you could just hear them wincing on there, and just they wanted to be all macho about it, yeah, no, I'm fine, as they hobble off.
It sounds an awful lot like Double the Fist. Do you ever watch
talking
that
about the ABC show? Yeah.
But that, Broforce put to music sort of thing.
Yeah, that was a good show.
I have it on
Very
DVD.
obscure.
It's great.
Yeah? I used to enjoy watching it. We'll have to sit down and watch it at some point.
If you watch the first episode of it, or the second episode of it, it's got a very young, completely yet unknown Yvonne Strahovski in it. So she's all cute and young.
Who? Who are we talking about?
The actress. She's
from
a bunch of stuff. You'd recognize her face.
Anything mainstream. Would Marin recognize her face?
No, Marin doesn't recognize most people's faces. No, she's in Dexter and a few other things.
Okay.
You'd recognize her
Dexter, at
face.
least.
She's been in a few Aussie stuff, obviously, because that's where she started. But that was the first thing she was ever in. So, it's just kind of funny.
Interesting.
Yeah, let me look at her IMDb, see who's what, seen what, if anything. Louis, apparently Killer Elite. Edge. I don't know what the hell that is.
Yeah, mainstream.
Louis is mainstream. Everyone loves Louis.
What is Louis?
Louis C.K. television.
No, he's
show.
that ginger comic, isn't he?
Hmm?
He's the ginger one, isn't he?
Yeah. The one that's actually funny.
Oh, okay. Anyway, while you're doing that...
Not Carrot Top.
No. He's built now. Have you seen photos of him recently?
Yeah, I have.
He's a gym junkie. That's, scary. He's got this, I don't know, chiseled body, and then above the neck, it's just this dumb head. But anyway,
He's a roided up carrot.
I wouldn't say that to his face, because he'd pummel me, but... anyway, yeah. So, Five Nights at Freddy's. How do we go with that one? So, is it, do you think, more the jump scare kind of horror, or do you think it actually does create an atmosphere in the game?
Definitely the atmosphere, and you see that going back to that immersion video. It's the whole waiting. It's the not knowing. The best thing about that immersion video is the cattle prodder they've got right behind them.
Oh yeah,
just shooting the electric right into the vent.
But I loved his face when they're like, "Oh, we're going to cattle prod you," and he's like, "What?" And they're like, "We have a cattle prod," and I was like, "Yeah, awesome." But you
hear it going, they're running it up against the wall and that vent and all that.
Sparking it off the walls of the vent.
Very close to them.
You'll have to watch the video to find out what happened with the cattle prod, but yeah, it's well worth it.
The other thing was the slice of pizza that was left on the set. That was obviously a week old, and then Michael just instantly yeah, I'll eat that. Regrets it instantly.
That was one of the horror.
Pizza. It doesn't go.
That's the horror element. Will I get salmonella or not?
I'm pretty sure it was pepperoni. You can't get salmonella of that shit.
No, that shit's already that processed and preservative. It's yeah.
It's full of cancer, but that's okay. It's delicious.
It's the good kind of cancer.
Yeah, I encourage everyone to eat that kind of cancer. Really, the more you eat, the less cancer there is for everyone else. So, really, you're doing yourself a favor.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're doing your part.
Wasn't there, what's the Stephen King one, about the hospital?
You're going to have to be more specific than that.
There's a TV series, and it had the creature that ate your illness.
Yeah. I can't remember what it was.
The creature? Do you mean John Coffey?
No.
Is this where you come out as being racist?
Kingdom Hospital, that was it.
Yeah.
Kingdom Hospital, where they had that creature that could eat the illness out of you.
Yeah, but it was Stephen King, so there was other shit going on there too. And then, Stephen King is he was the Game of Thrones before Game of Thrones. He'd make you attached to people, then he'd kill them. But that was his thing. It was always the characterization, wasn't it?
The difference is you're shitting your pants the entire time.
Yeah, well,
I remember
there's that.
That came out ages ago. I remember watching it and thinking, like, I think I watched the first episode and thought it was really good, but then I never managed to catch any of the following ones.
Oh, it's worth it. It's good. I mean, it's got a more generic reason as to why things are happening, but it's got that creature that eats all the sickness.
Well, because that whole thing, like, the reason I mentioned John Coffey is obviously Green Mile, which is also a Stephen King book. Well, short story, I think. And, because he basically does the same thing. He eats the disease and he spits it out again.
That's right. There's less supernatural stuff in that. Like, that's such a small part, which I think made it a lot more special and a lot more accessible to a lot more people.
Right. Cool.
Good chat.
I'll have to add that to my pile of shit I haven't seen.
Kingdom Hospital.
Yes.
I might have a.
I like the
still.
gothic, like, looking giant-ass building in the title screen as well.
I just like the little anteater thing that eats everything. Sucks the sickness out of you. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I have got a copy of that if you want, Arthur.
Okay, I'll grab it. I'm happy with that. Apparently it's got Evangeline Lilly in it. I don't know who she plays, but she's in it.
She has to be young in it then.
She's not that old now. She's only in the, like, 30s.
Kingdom Hospital. Yep, I've got a copy still. 13 episodes.
Really? Yeah. Is it like a mini series, or is it? Did they just kill it before it?
No, it was more of a mini series kind of like this was before the whole that was successful. I guess we'll just milk it for all we've got. It was just this is the story, done.
Your number one horror films that you guys to enjoy. So, Arthur, what's your favorite scary movie?
Scary movie.
One or two?
Say scary movie, Arthur.
No, it's not a scary movie.
Do you need a hand? No, I can do it myself.
Scary movie too, Mike. You've got the wrong movie.
Damn it.
Embarrassed yourself.
Yep.
I don't know.
No, you haven't got a fairy. Okay. Aaron, what about you?
It.
It. Okay.
I hope they do the
okay.
new one justice.
Will. That's right.
It looks pretty fucking
We
amazing.
can
in the
all
trailers.
check that out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, have a watch of that. All right. And Dan's favorite film is. Well, anyway, all right.
What about yours, Mike? Oh,
Mine. Well, suppose I don't really have a favorite. I'd say either. I don't know. Yeah, it's a hard question for me. I can't really answer that.
Evil Dead.
It'd be Annabelle, or it'd be Silent Hill, or it'd be any other fucking horror film. I can't really. Yeah, I don't know.
let you
Put the
think
jury
on it
out.
for a couple.
It might be the new one. Anyway.
Yeah,
Well,
float
cool,
down
cool.
here.
So, Arthur, you happy to wrap this up for us?
Well, thank you all for joining us for this soap, and it's over and out from all of us, namely me, and Aaron, and Mike, and Dan.
And don't forget, guys, check the comments and YouTube subscribing and all that kind of jazz, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Catch you on the flip side.